traveling us in to this virtual work session for the Board of Commissioners on Tuesday, November 17th. Here on Zoom, we have Chair Catherine Harrington, Commissioner Pam Treese, Commissioner Roy Rogers. Feel free to say hello.
Hello.
Hi. Sorry.
It's okay. As well as CAO Tanya Angie, our County Counsel Alan Rapplier. I don't know if we have our CEO for Clean Water Services, Diane Taniguchi Dennis, on yet, but I know we have Mark Jockers. And then, of course, our clerk and IT team making sure all the technology works. So the first item on today's agenda is board and leadership communications. Is there anything my colleagues would like to share with us today?
I don't have a lot to share. I can quickly report that Commissioner Willie and I attended the Hillsborough Small Business Solutions Series. That we were in the same meeting when it was hacked previously. And so, again, going back to the Zoom issues, it was, they weren't using the password protected piece. So, but now they do. And we had a series of questions. We had the opportunity to talk about really what we're doing. A lot of the questions were around the CRF, but we also had the opportunity to talk about the changes. I talked a little bit about the just the degree of change we've gone through over the past 2 years to now, the fact that the changes that we're looking at coming down the road. And Jerry talked a bit about broadband. And there was a lot of Q&A. It was really much more about just being in touch with that community, and it went well. And like the rest of you, I've been attending all of the conversations in the evenings. I've had my board meetings, and things are moving right along. So I've got my hands on the steering wheel, ready to roll here. Roy?
Thank you. Yeah, I attended the last two. Pam, you did a great job, as I mentioned last night. And the chair, she mesmerized me with her explanation of the Metzger LID, which I have a long history with, but she got right on target. So I appreciate that thorough and accurate description.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah, what was accurate? It was good. Yesterday we had a last committee meeting for the Southwest Corridor. I know the chair said a few words at the beginning as a guest. Really, it was just a kind of a analysis of what happened. We're all not discouraged. We identified a lot of projects that need to be done in the corridor, and so we move forward with a better understanding. WCCC was yesterday. We had topics including the STIP upcoming, which you've been briefed on, and that was it. The only unusual item was that Denny has formally resigned as the JPAC representative and the representative for the Region 1. He'd done that last a little longer than a week ago. I contacted for the procedures Steve Calloway, the largest city, and it was his responsibility, since we're not involved with the city stuff. I mean, we're involved with ours, but not his. And told him that he needs to have some meetings with the mayors. To my surprise, it was a quick train yesterday. They'd already met and talked apparently, and nominated Steve Calloway for JPAC and Pete for the ODOT position. So again, that's outside of our purview. Then I was listening last night to you guys' meeting. You did a great job, and JPAC is a very abbreviated agenda this Thursday morning, and then we have the last meeting for the House Bill 2017 Advisory Committee. That's this Friday. A little, just for your general information, a little kind of sideway bar is that it's almost complete. This is a huge. I've never been on a committee that had about 30 members, and everybody's got different ideas. But At the last minute, the mayor of Tualatin was asking for a little different allocation of funds. I'm not certain how that's going to work out, but he may contact all of you and say, I'd like more. I agree with his position. I just don't know that there are the funds there. So we'll discuss that Friday morning. So that's enough for me.
Can I ask a question about the community investment conversation logistics last night? I saw you listed in the participants list, Roy, but I didn't want to put you on the spot by asking in the meeting as to whether or not you wanted to participate as a panelist and be on camera or to just stay and listen.
After you got off, I stayed on and they elevated me and I was actually on camera and Pam and I discussed a bit. And what I think the agreement was from everybody is that we all on any of these sessions would be elevated to a panelist, because I attended the one of Jerry's and I was on, what were we on? We were not, let's see.
Yeah.
No, we weren't on Zoom. We were
YouTube.
on YouTube on Jerry's. Then they said, well, no, this time you can go to Zoom, but you can't be seen or heard. And now I guess we're all going to be there. So anyway, that's where we're at.
Okay, well, what I'm hoping we will do is in the report that will make it clear that there were basically full commissions, or, 3 to 4 commissioners, actually 4, whatever, on these different calls. But that due to our own logistical choices or actions, not all of the commissioners were visible or given an opportunity to be visible, but they in fact were listening to the community conversation. I want to make sure that that is clear in the final report. And I'm glad to and I'm glad to hear that for the remaining 2 that all commissioners who are in attendance will be visible as well. Go ahead, Tanya.
I will contact Marcus Mundy and I will share this feedback with him and ensure that's in the report.
Okay. All righty. Well, for me, I have not really taken stock of all the meetings since last Tuesday. There have been a lot of them. Multiple meetings with the governor in different collections of people with regard to where our public health experts have been trying to work with the state to get some different changes than her working with her experts on recommending a freeze and what did we think about that and announcing that and following up with commissioners. We're just in quite a whirlwind right now. Beyond that, I can't remember what other committee meetings I've been at, and I'll take a look back, and if there's anything appreciable, I'll send you an email.
The one thing that we haven't mentioned is, at least here, is that we've been in AOC meetings today. So, and tomorrow. So just FYI, and we talked casually about it before, but the platform's a little difficult to really get engagement with. Diane, I want you to know that the experience attending a conference for WEFTech was far superior. So thank you.
Yep, it sure was. But I think part of that was that we had the benefit of our staff at Clean Water Services taking care of all the viewing logistics for us, versus for the AOC conference, we're all on our own, whether, in Roy's case, he's in his office, you and I are at home and trying to deal with our various connectivity needs and configurations. For me, I brought more equipment home, so I'm getting to participate in this meeting using my office monitor, my display, versus on the smaller laptop screen, which is much more comfortable for my eyes. But it's a whole new wiring setup. So my getting on the AOC call today was involving some new configuration logistics as well. But
And there were no
nonetheless.
beignets. There were no beignets for the AOC meeting.
Yes, that's true. Okay, so why don't we go to leadership communication? Ms. Angie.
Good afternoon, Chair Harrington, commissioners. Just as I want to kind of segue right into technology, given Chair your comments, and just a reminder to commissioners to help you in your virtual offices. If you do have any needs, please just reach out to me and I'll connect you with the appropriate staff. I know these needs continue to emerge, so don't be afraid to ask. Or just express what challenges you have and we can help develop some solutions. One item multiple staff are involved in is bringing forward, and this is not on the rolling agenda yet, so I wanted to raise this to your attention. On the December 1st work session, we will be bringing forward a 6-month, January through June 2021 financial strategy. And what the strategy is aimed to do is to address COVID operational needs, post-CARES funding. It's a financial and at the same time still recognizing the need and the desire for an additional stimulus package that will help support not only Washington County operations, but the community. So what will be brought forward on the 1st is more focus on Washington County operations and our services and how they support community need. So as I know this is of interest to several of you, I will be sending this information out in an email later this week, in addition to it being posted in the board packet. Since the packet will be posted on Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving, I wanted to get this out to you ahead of time. And staff are available to meet with you and answer any questions you have before the board meeting. That's all I have.
Madam Chair, members of the board, I'd just like to take a moment to recognize Chris Gilmore. As you all know, I think he's moving on to Multnomah County, be a assistant county counsel there. But Chris has been an invaluable member of our staff and has been very helpful to the county. And I know some of you have reached out and thanked him personally, but I just want to acknowledge him before the board because he's leaving on Thanksgiving, so he's not going to be, this is the last moment time he'll have before he leaves. And so Chris started here in 2003, and he actually took my spot when I went to be the city attorney. I recommended him. He was a promising land use attorney, and he helped navigate the county through Measure 37 and 49 for about 6 or 7 years. And then he took over the senior litigator role, working with Bill Blair, and he's been involved in our most difficult cases for the last 8, 9, 10 years now. And he's done some really fabulous work for us, won some very important cases for us, poured his heart and soul into his job. And really, I think it's taken a toll on him to some degree after losing a case you worked on for a few years, but tempered by the joy of winning cases also. So he's won more cases than that. And he's also been very valuable for being proactive and doing risk management and implementing policies and procedures. Our major incident policy is now partially responsible because of Chris. And so he's not only just defends us, but he looks forward to protect us from the future. So he's going to be greatly missed. And I just wanted to let the board know that I'm going to miss him and that we'll be carrying forward though. So thank you.
Please pass on my thanks for his service to Ellen. It's been great to have his support and knowing that when we're in these difficult situations, you have somebody that you can deal with that has such great depth of experience and sensitivity about what the issues are. It's been really helpful to me.
Okay.
I would agree. I contacted him and thanked him. His tenacity is important in that kind of a role. he certainly is a good fighter for our issues. And so I didn't know he replaced you, Alan. I didn't remember that part.
Yeah, yes. He
he,
took over as the land use attorney. He's quite the brawler. So, and he's going to be right down the street. So we'll still be able to reach out and ask him stuff, but.
That's good. Yeah. Thank you on my behalf. He did great.
Okay, great. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you, Alan, for giving us the overview. I've not had a long tenure of experience with Chris, but I do have a great deal of respect for the work that I have had the opportunity of visibility for while being a commissioner starting in January of last year. He always helped provide the information that I needed, as well as helped me better understand the context of what was happening and what was going on in a way that served me well as a commissioner. It's really amazing to hear of the involvement that he's had in the agency, such as you mentioned, with risk management and development of new policies, such as the major incident handling, and makes me realize that you really do have a staff of senior people. And when we lose any one of them, we've lost not only their specific expertise, but we've gained a big hole. And so that's something that we'll have to look out for moving forward to help ensure that we support a legal organization that has a mix of senior and more junior or less experience, so that there's always a healthy pipeline of folks in the agency. So he's going on to become the assistant county counsel at Multnomah County.
Right.
Does that
So
mean that? Go ahead.
So I just say, yeah, he's going to be a litigator for Multnomah County. They have a pretty good sized team of litigators. And so he'll have, he's looking forward to a shorter commute. You know, he lives right in Portland there. So, and I will certainly pass on your thanks. He might be listening, I don't know, but I will definitely pass that on. And I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, great. Well, yes, please do that. I was hoping he was listening in directly because I just didn't feel eloquent to type in my thoughts via email to Chris. So thank you so much for conveying this. I'm really, really glad that he's continuing his career in public service. I don't take it as a loss that folks may leave Washington County and go join another public agency here in Oregon. I think that is a wonderful career move, because the expertise is still serving us well in all that we have common here in Oregon and the Pacific Northwest. So I'm glad he continues to be part of our regional community, both as a resident, but more importantly, professionally as well. That's great.
Thank you.
Great. I take it nothing else you need to fill us in on today? All righty, great. How about you, Ms. Taniguchi Dennis with Clean Water Services?
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, Board. Wanted to give you some good news. We had a really great leaf drop-off event this past Saturday at Westview High School, Cedar Park Middle School, and Hazelden Elementary. We picked up double the amount of leaves from this one location, so 434 cubic yards. There were 42 boxes of food donated by people and $306 in cash. They were very generous, and folks are wanting to help, and they did a great job being physically distanced, and they were all masked up, and our team was really busy even though it was quite rainy. So our next event is on Saturday, November 21st, and we'll be at Aloha High School, Meadow Park in Oak Hills for the second and the last time for that area for the season. So it's been a great success. We're finding less leaves in the street, so less leaf call outs. So we're very thankful for all of the people that I know it was a big change for folks, but they've done a really great job coming to these leaf pickups and handling the leaves from their property. So we thank them very much. This week, we have 5 employees that we are monitoring for exposure to COVID in their social lives. They're doing well, and we're hopeful that we'll have some negative testing going on. But there is Holly reports there's an increase of folks that we are working with and managing their situations. So, but other than that,
excuse me, Diane, did you say 5 employees? Thank you. Thank you.
So Holly and the team continue to do well, and the team is modifying operations to manage the new world we're in starting Wednesday. So they're doing a really great job. They're keeping their spirits up. So thank you.
That's great. Thank you. So onward to formal agenda item discussions. So the agenda has been updated, and I also have a request for potential order change. So I'll just walk through the updates. The change I would like to request is with the presentations. I was wondering if we might be able to swap the order of the Harold Haynes Award from the Committee for Community Involvement with the COVID update.
Yeah, I agree.
In case the recipients with THPRD are attending. You know, I wish they would stay and watch the COVID update because they're always chock full of terrific information, very informative stuff. But does that seem a-okay, Tanya?
Yep.
And commissioners? Okay. Okie dokie. Then under section 6, the action agendas, item D has been added to authorize the use of electronic board signatures for approval of board meeting items. This just means that instead of Kevin handing me a red folder after the meeting to sign a few documents, he'll be able to just apply either my signature or the vice chair signature or the former vice chair. So
I'm
that's what
opposed.
that-
I'm opposed. I think you ought to sign every one of those things. And you need at least 3 of us. So Pam, if you or I disagree, she gets to sign forever. This is wonderful.
DocuSign is an amazing tool, Catherine.
I know, but as this is perfunctory to memorialize the decision we actually make in our meeting, it seems like during this virtual time that doing the digital signature is the way to go.
Great.
On the consent agenda, under the support services section, which is later in the consent agenda list, item K has been added to adopt the resolution in order to amend the fiscal year 2020-21 pay plan and position and salary report. Are there any other informational needs or order changes or any questions? Okay. I think with the 2 presentations and the public hearings will probably go quickly, but then we have 4 action items. So depending upon how much public testimony we get, I anticipate it might be a couple of hours of a meeting. Anything else on that part, folks? Nothing? Okay. All righty then. We'll move into the first item on our agenda. We're a little bit early, so I hope we're not catching staff unawares, plus an outside speaker. Oh, looks like Chief Kincaid is there. No worries. Onward to Emergency Medical Services EMS Alliance overview and update. Take it away.
So we're going to start with an introduction from Tricia Mortel. And Tricia, hopefully you can unmute for us and start us off.
The proverbial talking on mute. Very sorry. It is, I was just getting things organized here from getting on boarded to a speaker view. So thank you. Good afternoon, commissioners. It's my pleasure to start the presentation here about an update to the emergency medical services system. So next slide, please. So just a quick history. So we have recently made many changes to our EMS structure and process, but just 1 year ago, we created a new alliance. The board authorized the creation of the Washington County EMS Alliance to be a shared governance table for coordination and progressive EMS systems here in Washington County. And that's what we'll be talking about today, the work that they've been doing. You're also aware that for some time we've been sharing with you the need to update and contemporize all of our EMS government documents. This includes our code, our administrative rule, and the ambulance service area plan. So we've been working on that over the summer, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And just recently, your board approved minor changes to the EMS code that allowed the EMS Council to sunset and officially recognize the EMS Alliance. Next slide. So before we provide you with an update of the work that has been done so far, I want to give you a preview of the whole timeline. And looking past November, you'll see other opportunities for us to engage with you, the board, on the EMS system enhancements and improvements. So in December, we will be bringing you an 18-month review of the performance of the EMS ambulance service. This is part of our contract management and contract oversight, as well as renewal process. Early next year, we also hope to provide you with the first round of recommended changes to governance documents. We're calling that phase 1 changes. Many of these changes will be technical, in the weeds, but we'll ask for your review and conversation and input on any of the policy level conversations that will come out of this review, such as when we asked you a year or so ago to temporarily recognize fire ambulance as part of our emergency ambulance system. That first process would then lead us to review and update other important documents, as I mentioned, the ambulance service area plan, which is much more extensive, and consider what changes to our ambulance contract, our ambulance franchise agreement would be necessary. So that is just where we're headed. But I think the most important conversation today is to introduce the speakers to talk about the work that's already been done over the past year through the EMS Alliance. So Sia is currently serving as the chair of this new alliance, which is, again, designed through IGA agreements with our local fire providers. And Chief Michael Kincaid with Forest Grove Fire and Rescue, who was previously the chair of the EMS board-appointed council, is also going to share today. So I'll turn it over to them. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Tricia, for the introduction. And as Tricia mentioned, I'm wearing a slightly different hat today than you normally see from me. I am serving as the chair here of the EMS Alliance, and Chief Kincaid and I will be tag teaming this presentation. So our presentation today is designed to give you a brief overview of the work of the EMS Alliance over this past year since you approved the IGA. The EMS Alliance is their purpose is to make strategic and technical recommendations for system improvements for our emergency medical services in Washington County. So for today's work session, we're going to accomplish a couple of things. Chief Kincaid is going to walk us through the EMS Alliance governing board and standing work groups, tell you a little bit about the work that's being done in the Alliance's work groups right now. And then I will cover some of the 2021 priorities, wrap up the presentation, and open it to your questions. And with that, I will turn it over to Chief Kincaid. Oh, Chief, before I turn it over to you, one other thing I do want to recognize, we have a couple of other stakeholders in the room from the Alliance. Chief Weiss from TPF&R was going to try to make it. I also know we've got leadership from Metro West Ambulance here as well. So just want to recognize that they are joining us today in support of this presentation. And Chief Kincaid, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, I see head nods. That's good. All right, so first slide on there talks about the foundational principles. And these were established with the assistance of then County Administrator Don Boone. And these became the guiding principles with which the EMS Advisory Council and the EMS Alliance have been moving forward with an effort to improve our system. You've seen these before. We talked very closely about an integrated EMS system, transparency, responsiveness, clinical excellence, and so forth. I would make a personal comment that as the senior serving member since 2008 on the various iterations, the EMS Ops Group, the EMS Advisory Committee, the EMS, now the EMS Alliance, I've never seen such a high degree of public-private partnership as what we've achieved now with the EMS Alliance. So I'm very pleased with what's going on right now, and I'd like to brief you on some of the task forces by going to the next slide right now. So the EMS Alliance governing board members are made up with Sia Lindstrom, Chief Rodney Lenz from the City of Banks. He could not attend today, but Chief myself, Chief David Downey from Hillsborough, and Chief Derek Weiss from Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue. Next slide. The affiliate members that we have is at the last meeting, we approved WACA as an affiliate member. From Jennifer Reese will be the representative there as an integral part of that. Metro West Ambulance, JD Featon is the representative as an affiliate member, and we have openings for others in progress as the system develops. Next slide. The current work groups that we've been working on right now include centralized dispatch, and this is probably the one that we've made the most headway in. It's been challenging because of COVID and this summer's wildfire, since you may have noticed that almost all the members of the advisory or the Alliance are fire chiefs, and we've had a very busy summer, but we've still made major progress in our #1 priority, which was established by the EMS Advisory Council before and continued by the EMS Alliance with centralized dispatch. Now, I made a mistake in my slide right there. The bottom button that describes that is actually describing on the next page the quality improvement, but centralized dispatch would allow WACA to dispatch all of the emergency resources that are going to a medical emergency in Washington County. And everybody's been working hard on that project, led by Chief Weiss. And I'm happy to say that it's a success. We've identified all the components, the funding, the necessary things that need to occur, and we're in the process of making that happen. And we hope to have that happen during the final quarter of 2020 or the first quarter of 2021. Chief Downey has been leading the data work group, and each of these work groups we have developed a system so that we can track and develop what the goals of each work group is and develop objectives for success. And so that's been going well. Tasked with investigating the feasibility of a centralized data repository, and where that helps us is to help understand the treatments, interventions, and operational changes that we make. What impact are we having as a system, not just as individual agencies? In order to improve patient care for the emergency medical services system in Washington County. Next slide, please. The quality improvement, which has the mistake that I made there, describes the dispatch center, but I think you get the idea. We haven't started that one yet because that is on the horizon, but we have an issue of just not enough time as we were working on the centralized dispatch and with COVID and with the fires, but we do have that on the horizon. Unfortunately, I don't think I will be leading that one as I've announced my retirement for January, but that will be moving forward with the remainder Alliance members. The governance document and update, that's moving very far forward with Sia and Tim Case, and all 3 statutory documents that guide the EMS work are being reviewed and brought into Alliance and updated so that we can have a fresh, up-to-date look at what those governing policies are. And I believe that the next slide goes to Sia.
Thank you, Chief Kincaid, for running through that. I do want to pause before I dive into this slide and just reinforce something Chief Kincaid said, and that was that one of the things I've been struck by this last year is the collaborative working relationship between Fire and Metro West as they work to further integrate the system, make sure that it is working as effectively and efficiently as we all want it to be. The work that they've come together to do over this last year has been truly extraordinary, and I'm really proud of the Alliance for some of the foundational work it's done. Chief Kincaid, as he mentioned, is retiring, and it's going to be a big loss to us. His leadership has been really key as we've made the transition from the Advisory Council to the Alliance, and I know I'll miss his wise guidance as he moves on to the next stage of his professional life, and we really wish him well in his retirement. So this is my chance to say a public thank you to Chief Kincaid for his leadership. It's been really central to us. So thank you for that. Let me walk you through some of the work that we have accomplished and then talk to you a little bit about the priorities for the EMS Alliance as we move into 2021. As you can imagine, because this is a new group, we did have to establish all of our founding governance documents, our bylaws. Once your board and the other partner jurisdictions approved the IGA and got it signed, then we were able to move forward and get our bylaws in place, our charters for our various work groups that Chief Kincaid just walked us through, and begin to work on some of the priorities. You probably heard from Chief Kincaid that the #1 priority walking into this was centralized dispatch. And it's pretty understandable why that would be such a priority, to ensure that our ambulance system and our 911 system are talking to each other well. And once they started working on a solution, we're able to come up with a fairly elegant one. And that is in process, as Chief Kincaid mentioned, and we hope to have that in place next year as they start to put the pieces together and really test that system. Centralized data has been an important piece of the work they've done as well, in order to make sure that our systems are aligned. We are measuring the right things, measuring it well, measuring it together, and have agreement on how we move forward from solutions that come from that data review. Now, you probably can guess that it was a difficult year to work through as we dealt with COVID and the COVID shutdown there for a while, and then fires. We did lose a couple of meetings this year. It did not seem to affect the efficiency of this group. I will tell you, they continued to work hard, even though their attention was pulled in other directions. And one of the things I was impressed with this group was that when COVID hit this group, they pivoted and said, okay, how do we start talking strategically about the impact that COVID is going to have on our EMS system, how we need to change the way we work together to make sure that the operational changes that COVID is instilling, some of them will continue to be with us, and how do we make sure to integrate those into our systems? And so the strategic conversations led to some other really good conversations about behavioral health and making sure that we're addressing behavioral health issues in our system. We had a speaker come out from Tri-County 911, TC 911, which works with, it's a program, some of you may have heard of it, that works with folks who are more likely to use emergency systems as their primary healthcare avenue. And how do we work to get them integrated into a system of healthcare a little more effectively? They are interested in looking at a coordinated purchase of some key equipment. I know Chief Kincaid has played the lead on talking about how do we make sure that things like cardiac monitors and those kinds of things are consistent across our systems, and continue to explore the benefits of other integrated systems strategies that will help the EMS system function more effectively. So with that, I will close it out, and I would welcome, and I know Chief Kincaid would as well, welcome any questions you have for us about the work of the EMS Alliance.
Chair Harrington, you muted yourself.
Sorry, Commissioner Rogers or Commissioner Treese, any questions?
No, the only thing I'd say is, Michael, again, congratulations on a long and very distinguished career. Always sad to see people go, especially when they're going to have more fun than we do. So that's irritating. But I do hope you enjoy your vacation, and thanks for your contribution. This isn't easy stuff. I understand it isn't. Trying to herd people together with different perspectives is always complicated. So thanks.
I would just like to, excuse me, Michael. I would just like to say, along with many others, I'm a recent user of this system. And I had an SD fall off my bike, and I had support from the Hillsborough Fire Department and from Metro West. So from a user perspective, I want you to know that I felt in such good hands all the way along. And I know that mine was, and no pun intended, an on the street experience. It's indicative of the work that goes behind, and I'm very well aware of that. So I just want to say thank you for working together for all of our community. And when you are in need, as I was, all of a sudden you realize just how important all those pieces are. So thank you to everyone that puts their heart and soul behind this, as well as to the first responders on the scene. So thank you.
I'd like to start with recognizing Chief Kincaid for his long career in the domain of public safety for fire and rescue, for communities of all types, more urban, suburban cities, as well as for our rural areas. I've had the opportunity in my elected service career of seeing the work that you have helped foster, and more consolidation and efficiency for the benefit of the constituents that you serve. So thank you very much for a long and valued career. I have appreciated,
I was just going to say thank you, Chair Harrington.
It's going to be hard to find a replacement for you, for all the different, you wear multiple hats, right?
There's a lot of talent out there, and it's time for me to pass the baton.
Well, I really appreciate hearing that, because I'm not as close to the ranks of the various fire departments here in our whole multi-county area, as well as the whole state. So thank you for pointing that out. I did appreciate that this is the first year of accomplishments in a very complex year, where we are all reminded of how much we value our first responders. And I appreciate that. For if there is to be a subsequent presentation, I would really appreciate having early in the presentation a bit of stating of the customer proposition, such as, why should our Washington County residents and businesses care that an EMS Alliance exists? And then the other customer proposition is this audience you're in front of right now, the Board of Commissioners. Why is this in Washington County as an agency's domain? What, if any, role do we have to play? Why should I care? And so I think if there is a next time, I think that ensuring that we hear that and that our constituents have access to that will be very valuable to us and appreciated. So that does not at all diminish from the progress that I understand and have appreciated from our prior presentations on the EMS Alliance and changing the bylaws and getting those improvements made. So thank you very much. Are there any other last commissioner questions or comments? Thank you to all the partners for making progress in these 4 different domains that you outlined for us today. It sounds like good goals and good progress in your first year towards working to those goals, and we look forward to more of the same. Stay healthy, everybody. And have a great retirement, Chief Kincaid. Thank you for role modeling that. Okay, we'll then move on to our next topic, which is proposed revisions to Washington County Code Chapters 804 and 808 pertaining to the Solid Waste Advisory Committee. Welcome to our speakers. Hello, and take it away.
Good afternoon, Chair Harrington, Commissioners Treese and Rogers. Thanks for having me this afternoon. So I'm here today to talk with you all. I'll introduce myself again. Marnie let me know that she's here, but the awkward Zoom introduction can be spared. So I'm Tom Eggleston. I'm the manager of the Solid Waste and Recycling Division in Health and Human Services. And I'm here today to talk with you about the Solid Waste Advisory Committee and some code changes to potentially make some modifications to that committee that advises your board on solid waste topics. So today we're going to discuss our ongoing efforts to incorporate equity into the structure of the Solid Waste Advisory Committee. As you may recall, we joined your board for a May 12th, 2020 work session. At that work session, we discussed some high-level objectives and goals for this project to incorporate equity into this advisory committee pursuant to your board's resolution and order 2030, the equity resolution and order. On May 26th, we returned to your board with a consent agenda item that directed County Council to file an ordinance to change chapters 8.04 and 8.08 as they pertain to the committee, as this committee is established in those code chapters. So we've spent the last few months with our current committee and with community groups to arrive at the proposal we have before you today. So we're here to look for your reaction to that and chat with you about it. So thank you for the next slide. The policy questions we've brought for you today is first, we would like to understand what is the preferred membership composition on your board's Solid Waste Advisory Committee. So I think it's important, speaking about the question you just had for the EMS Alliance, this committee I think is a classic committee that's designed and intended to advise your board on decisions related to solid waste and recycling topics. So we bring everything we bring to your board, we bring through this committee before it comes here with a recommendation and a conversation. And secondly, kind of more holistically, we're looking at trying to ask, does your board support the proposed amendments to Washington County Code chapters 8.04 and 8.08, modifying the Solid Waste Advisory Committee related to the committee's name, membership representation, membership terms, and bylaw adoption process? So that kind of sets the tone for the presentation. Thank you. Next slide. So let's start by discussing the community feedback and research that staff conducted to arrive at this proposal. Throughout the summer, we held multiple listening sessions with community groups. So we put a picture of a screen here instead of a picture of people around a table because those were the types of listening sessions they were. This is a new era for us. My first presentation to your board in Zoom as well. So I feel a little bit out of place, but I think it's working out so far. So we had conversations with the current committee. We had a pretty robust series of multiple conversations with the current committee. We also worked with the Civic Leaders Program. So we had a meeting with the alumni and the current participants in the Civic Leaders Program to kind of discuss the proposals and some of the topics they were interested in terms of revising the committee structure. We met with master recycler volunteers. We met with environmental promoters, who are a cohort of folks from our Environmental Promoters Hope program with Centro Cultural. And we also met with the Washington County Haulers Association as stakeholders in this process as well. We also did a robust research and reviewed various other boards and commissions that have already taken the journey of adopting equity principles into their frameworks and structures. So in this review, we really took a close look at your board's equity resolution that I mentioned earlier. We really read it thoroughly and tried to identify all of the signals in that resolution order that spoke to this type of board and commission and actions that your board was looking to achieve there. We also conducted multiple interviews with Metro staff to learn from their perspectives and their experience in their working on the Regional Waste Advisory Committee. And I I actually serve as the Washington County representative on that committee. So I'm involved in working through the challenges of starting a new committee with new bylaws and coming to group agreements and processes. So it's been a great journey and a good learning experience for us as well to apply here. We conducted interviews with our HHS equity consultants, training for transformation. They have been working with us in HHS for a while, and we have a trusted relationship with them. So we had a couple conversations about the principles in our proposal. We also reviewed the Public Health Advisory Committee as a good example of a committee here at Washington County that has taken on the attempt to incorporate intentional representation and equity into its membership profile. And we finally consulted with the Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement here at the county to kind of make sure that we're on track to meet the vision that we understood they had and your board has for more inclusive boards and commissions at the county. Next slide, please. So let's start reviewing some of the themes we heard through these listening sessions in our research. One is kind of silly, it's kind of funny to me, but it makes a lot of sense. One of the things we heard, and actually we heard this most commonly, is solid waste is not a very approachable term. And especially in Spanish, when you translate into Spanish, it does not retain its meaning that we have for it. So our community members basically told us, why would I want to serve on a solid waste advisory committee? Use a term that we understand if you're interested in it. And a lot of folks are interested in recycling and our solid waste system. So we heard that one loud and clear, and it was actually kind of amusing to us. And we thought about our program name even, going, maybe we should think about this more holistically as well, not just for this committee. Another important thing we heard was the importance of intentional representation, which is an interesting concept. So instead of just saying we have 6 community members on our committee, we heard the importance of really calling out who we feel like should be represented on this committee and being intentional about it. Really speaks to the necessity of identifying groups that have been historically marginalized and not offered seats at the table, and asking them to join our work groups and our committees so that they can provide their input. One example is, obviously, we've been leading with race here at the county, so talking about racial and ethnic groups that have been marginalized in our communities, and also housing status. We make decisions about multifamily recycling programs, and we're about to do that this coming winter. And it would be good to have somebody that lives in an apartment community on a committee helping make decisions about the service that's provided to apartment communities. Another area here is citizen representation where they live. Right now, there's no current requirement that members are actually unincorporated Washington County residents, although all of the decisions they make affect unincorporated Washington County residents. So being more intentional with the representation, we heard, is a good take. And this intentional representation really speaks to the next theme that we uncovered. And this is really the need to work on our systems and engagement approaches to provide opportunity and access to those who have not been heard or included in the decision-making process. And this kind of speaks to some of the proposals. We heard a lot of experience at Metro, and we've experienced here, is we have a lot of opportunity for our industry partners to engage in decisions and conversations. We meet with them regularly. They attend board meetings. They provide testimony. We have a lot of community groups and community members that don't even know we exist or what we do and what services we provide. So really opening up the opportunity and creating the opportunity and providing access to decision making is a way for us to achieve more equitable outcomes in our processes. Additionally, we heard about the importance of centering diverse community voices and focusing on the public interest versus other interests that are in our systems. And then another interesting theme that has a word in it that is a strong word, and we left it in there because we heard it in several occasions, is the word intimidation. And this is not a word that is trying to imply that folks are feeling like they're being aggressively intimidated or intentionally someone is intimidating them. But really what we're hearing is community members representing the hesitance to disagree with somebody that is an expert, or sit on a committee with somebody that has so much knowledge about a topic that who am I to disagree with this person, or who am I to take a different position than this person? And I think that's important for staff to understand too, because we are experts and we are industry members in a sense in these kinds of settings as well. So it's an important power and balance dynamic that is really essential to helping community members through education and support, and creating a trauma-informed approach that really centers the community member voice in terms of what the conversations and topics are being had. So as an overarching review of the themes, So let's move into the proposed changes to the code. So the first one is a simple one, and it relates to our first finding was we are proposing to change the name to the Garbage and Recycling Advisory Committee. We tried to think of more creative names, but we thought people think of it as garbage and recycling. So let's be plain talk and let's really use that word. We're not big fans of the GRAC acronym, but maybe we'll just call it the committee. Another change that we're proposing is adding code language that ensures that recruitment and selection process is open to all and includes equity considerations. So we didn't get down into the details about intentional representation in the code language, and we are intending to carve that out in the bylaws that we would come back to your board with. And this code language would really just authorize that level of detail and provide that direction from the code perspective to get into those more intentional representation categories in bylaw. We would also add a provision that your board adopts the committee bylaws. It's currently not there. There's been some question in the past about that, and we understand that's consistent with other boards and commissions. We also have a couple dated references that don't align with current practices we would remove. Namely, there's one in the 808 that refers to adopting a solid waste management plan, and that has changed since 1969 when this code was adopted. And it's really, we rely on work with Metro, our partners, on the regional waste plan, and local governments are not adopting those plans, and it's worked through a different process. So referring to something that doesn't really happen, we think is a little bit of a cleanup opportunity. Next slide, please. So looking at proposed changes continued here, committee membership. This is a lot of the meat and potatoes on this proposal. And so the proposal here is to increase the number of public member positions from 6 to 9, to reduce the number of industry member positions from 3 to 1, make the industry member position a non-voting position, change the membership term from 5 years to 4 years, and to add new term limits that allow no more than 2 successive terms of membership. Next slide. So this is a little bit of a explanation for the proposed membership adjustments. So the proposed membership structure and staff's assessment really acknowledges the power imbalance that exists in knowledge, acknowledges the knowledge power imbalance, and the intent of the committee, as we understand it, is to get the community voice and to help your board hear from the community about these decisions before it comes to your meetings. We feel like this would increase the focus on the public interest and less focus on other interests that are in the system. We do feel like this proposal would advance equity by improving access and opportunity for marginalized groups. It would provide more opportunity for them to have seats at the table. It would also provide more opportunity for them to engage in conversation without that kind of power imbalance that's present. We feel like this centers community member voice, and we also feel like this removes some potential conflict of interest for some industry members. This has been a conversation in the past. It's not a serious issue, and I think it could be addressed other ways, but this is something that I think is a concern that we have about voting members. So next slide, please. So we did take this proposal to the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, the current committee, last Thursday. We didn't get time to put the how they felt about it or what they thought about it in this slide, but I have my summary here. So the committee did not reach a consensus and decided not to take a vote to make a recommendation at this time on the proposal. The committee was supportive of changing the name to the Garbage and Recycling Committee, ensuring recruitment is open to all segments of the community, adding a provision that the board adopts the bylaws, including terms and term limits, but the committee was not able to agree on the proposed changes to committee membership configuration. The committee members just had a robust discussion. It was a 2-hour conversation. It was a great conversation. We talked about the membership structure as it exists today and the value of industry representation and industry expertise. They also recognize that the understanding that if the intent of the committee is to be an advisory body whose main purpose is to solicit more complete community voice, then more public member and less industry member representation may make sense. They did not take an official vote and make a recommendation. Next slide, please. The next steps, we will hope to incorporate the feedback from your board in this proposal. Then we would schedule a first reading and second reading and first public hearing on the ordinances. We just got our numbers, so 871 and 872. Next month in December, we would be reviewing the proposed bylaws with the current committee. And then we will return to your board with a review of those bylaws as well, and then schedule adoption of bylaws following the adoption of the code. And that would be wrapped up, and we'd start with the new committee. So thank you. That's my presentation, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you for the slides, whoever drove.
You did a good job, Tom, for your first
Thank you.
Zoom entirely virtual presentation. Commissioner Rogers and Commissioner Treese, any questions or comments?
Yeah, I do, Tom. I'm going to put aside the DEI issues because that we've already solved, and as far as the name, I don't happen to like the garbage committee, but that's okay. I mean, I don't care about that. But going back on my recollection and trying to remember how this committee was established and what it always did and what's changed, because the reason that for years and years this committee existed was to give very technical advice on rate changes. In the private sector, other than in the utility business where you have a utility commission, you don't have oversight of the rates. But because it's a monopoly, we needed to have oversight of the rates, and we needed some advice on some very technical issues. And we could do that at the board. We wouldn't even need a committee. I mean, we could just simply take and deal with all that. So we had the committee, and it was staffed by our experts, who I always thought did a good job. And it was really populated with industry people who we try to get consensus with, so that we don't have these protracted arguments as to what rates were and protracted issues. And so I'm a little, I guess, confused about what's changed, because this to me is a technical committee, a big technical committee. It would advise the board on very technical issues. And I mean, it would be populated with people who are not technical but would give advice. And that's why I say the DEI, I don't have an issue. That's fine. And size of committee is not a big deal either. But you start taking all your industry members off. Does that mean that if we populate it with people who don't have expertise, is the board now going to be shifted into that responsibility, and we're going to have to deal with all these technical issues at the board level? Is that what's going on?
Thanks for the question, Commissioner Rogers. I think that's a really good question, and that was part of the heart of the discussion at the committee meeting on Thursday, was what is the intended purpose of this committee? And to be honest with you, the committee was formed in code in 1969, so the intended purpose at the time, I'm not sure exactly how it was envisioned. And the committee has historically been, rates has been a big part of its conversation, I would add that in my experience in the last 10 years working with the committee, the rates discussion is settled by the time it comes to the Solid Waste Advisory Committee. The Solid Waste Advisory Committee is usually an opportunity for the industry and the county, to be frank, because we worked on the rate review process up to a point to present it to the committee and then to say, what do you think? And they have pretty much unilaterally said, yeah, go for it, go forward. And so I think I understand what you're saying in terms of the intent, and if it's a technical committee to really understand the rate setting process. I don't think it's been used that way recently, and I don't think it's designed in a way to achieve that necessarily either. But that is a very good conversation and a good point in terms of what does your board want from this committee? Do we want a technical committee that is providing technical information and advice, or are we looking for a committee that is representing community voice? And I think there's, we're looking at this as staff from the equity lens, saying what we feel like is missing in the process is the community member input and the community member voice, because we haven't provided that much opportunity for that. We don't have any venues and avenues for that. We feel like the conversation between industry and staff and the board is a very established conversation, and it's a conversation that it happens regularly, and it's a negotiation that takes place behind the scenes in a sense, and not necessarily at the Solid Waste Advisory Committee.
I would just follow up then real quickly that again, I don't have the equity issue is presuming that that the people of various colors wouldn't have the expertise, and I disbelieve that. You got plenty of experts out there and plenty of people who are very talented. What I'm disappointed in, frankly, and to be honest, is that it sounds almost like they're just approving things that come to them after it's been vetted. And I was hopeful, and that's my being naive after all these years, that we really had somebody who was diving into these issues and bringing back a contra opinion if they had one. So if it's simply, and I don't want to use the word rubber stamp because that sounds so terrible, but if they're simply saying, sure, go for it, that's not a reason to have a committee. I mean, so I'm disappointed, but I'll let it go and let my other folks say what they're going to say.
Pam, Commissioner Treese, sorry.
It's no problem. I guess I'd like to hear Tom's response to what Roy just said.
Yeah, Roy, I hear what you're saying, and
Commissioner
I'm sorry, Commissioner
That's
Rogers.
okay.
Sorry.
That's on my birth certificate. We're in a formal setting.
I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate that. And I don't want to imply that the committee is a rubber stamp committee either. But I think that, there's some shared responsibility there with staff on our side, Washington County staff, and in terms of how we've managed the committee over the past decade plus, at least since I've been here and been involved. And I think that part of this proposal and this opportunity is for us to rethink how we're engaging with them and managing the committee. In the past, they've met a couple times a year. I think it's really challenging for a committee that meets 2 or maybe 3 times a year to really engage in topics and conversation and get into the heart of the issues. So I think we've seen a situation where the public members sitting on the committee are not feeling like they have the information or the background or the understanding to really engage in a thorough conversation. There is conversation and topic, but I don't think we're meeting the spirit of what you're describing as potentially what the original intent of that committee is or was.
So can I speak somewhat to that? Because as I was hearing Commissioner Rogers lay out what he was hoping for or had been thinking, and Tom, with your response, I brought up the bylaws and looking at both the RevMarks version and the clean version. So if I look, and this is in our work session packet, if I look at section 8.04.110, duties, and it says duties generally, and the advisory committee shall, it does talk about review and advise on matters pertaining to certificates of collection, storage, transport, or disposal, blah, 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 to review and advise on increase or decreases of collection rates established for certificate holders, and then make periodic reports on recommendations for proposed changes or additions to the rules or regulations. Wow, boy, doesn't that sound exciting for a local committee? What, I spent a lot of time, 12 years at Metro in the garbage domain, and it really is interesting stuff. It's interesting because the suite of services continues to change and evolve because of what we as community members are producing, so to speak, or dealing with in our economy. It's changing because of the types of, I don't want to call it technology yet. There is some technology changing, like plasma gas and all kinds of other, the handling of food scraps technology changes, for example. But I was dealing more with the ecosystem and how it operates has been evolving. Look at how China closed the door on taking our mixed, not necessarily clean, commingled recyclables, right? And having to adapt to that. So I think Commissioner Rogers is asking a very good question. And what I also learned during those 12 years as a Metro counselor changed is rate review changed. And for the local collection rates, everybody hires a consultant to take a look because the garbage collection companies, they don't want to open their books to a citizen advisory committee. So they hire a consultant that looks at everybody's books and does an averaging and it ends up getting sanitized, and that's what ends up being handled. Our staff looks at, so that what we end up getting is a recommendation based upon costs, a guaranteed profitability, so on and so forth. So it isn't an in-depth or it isn't an oversight to really look at that to make sure this monopoly is operating properly. So I got a little long-winded there, but it's what I wanted to say is I think Commissioner Rogers is right. This committee isn't serving what that intended role was for a lot of very good reasons. But at the same time, it's not clear to me of what it is these community members are signing up to do. We've used some very identified government vocabulary when I think what we're wanting is to have a community committee that will advise us in how the service is offered through outside private firms,
Exactly.
right? Because we're on the hook to make sure from a public health basis that they're getting adequate services. And I think we should perhaps step back and use that, what's that language term that Representative or now State Senator Chuck Riley uses? It needs to be more human terms and not our own government speak. If possible, if Alan lets me. To pick on our legal counsel because we have to do this properly. So Commissioner Rogers, that's where I was trying to segue off of your question, because I think I can relate to your intended need of wanting to have an oversight committee to look at the rates and to make sure that our community is getting treated fairly for these guaranteed rates, right?
Yes, I did. The only thing I disagree with you on is hearing what you did. I would never guess that the chair didn't take an in-depth dive. I bet you read every page. You probably knew it all, but and we're very familiar.
No, actually, let me divulge. I
No,
chose to not on the solid waste stuff because
Oh.
I felt, there's something more to this. I need to hear it. So
Yeah.
I chose to wait.
So if it was my preference, what I would do is I have no issue with the size of the committee. I have no issue with the DEI issues, but it would be to take a look at really what the committee is doing. And I don't expect them to be rate experts, but I wouldn't throw off all the haulers. I mean, that's important for them to sit there and these people give and take. I mean, if you're going to do that, then why do the haulers even want to belong? They would just argue through our staff. So there's got to be some redefining and rescoping. And if I had an interest in health and human services, why would I sign up for this committee? I mean, I don't even understand what I would do. Anyway, I'll stop. But it just seems like we ought to relook at the whole issue.
Well, I think it's fair. I don't understand it yet either, right? I'm trying to put myself in that community member's shoes. I also wondered, I thought I heard at one point that this pertains just to the urban unincorporated areas. I thought we also had a role for ensuring that the rural areas.
All of unincorporated, so rural and urban.
Oh, darn it, that's my mistake. Whenever you say unincorporated, I think urban unincorporated. 12 years of being at Metro. It's been 2 years and I haven't been able to correct that mistake. Thank you for your continued patience. I get it. Okay. A couple of other things I'm wondering if you and the community members discussed. One of the things that as a Metro counselor, when I started at Metro, I was the chair of SWAC because back then Metro counselors chaired it. And it was mostly industry, but we had 3 different community members, I think, maybe not 3, but part of the difficulty was the meetings were held during the day. And so I'm wondering, as you had your listening sessions, was there any discussion about when the committee would meet, days of the week, daytime, nighttime, and what are you thinking there?
Yeah, absolutely. That was a big conversation. Access, again, talking about access and opportunity and removing barriers to participation. It was even brought up that because many of those engagements were in Zoom, maybe some of those meetings should continue in Zoom because it's easier to participate for some folks. There's technology issues and barriers there too. But I would say 2 or 3 years ago, we made the decision to move the committee meetings to 6 p.m. instead of 10 a.m. For that reason, in exact reason. So we have been meeting at 6 p.m. And I would say, anecdotally, we've done maybe 3 community member recruitments for public positions on the committee since then. And we had probably 3 to 4 times the applicants once the committee meeting was moved into an evening time slot. So it made a huge difference. And I think it's a big part of making it accessible to community members. They have jobs. And that's another, part you're mentioning, us and industry members, this is our job. So we're showing up for work. But for community members, it's not their job. We're asking them to give us their time to give us their input and to react to things. So.
And when we had a presentation through a Metro grant, Centro Cultural had a solid waste and recycling cohort that was, I think, held in Spanish, and they came and presented to us last year, and some of the members expressed that they wanted to keep up in this domain. This committee, the way you're orienting it, seems like a great way, as I look to you, Tom, and you, Marnie, is a great way to ensure that they're able to contribute to the community that way. Is that in line with what you're thinking?
Absolutely. And the environmental promoters was a group that I mentioned. That is that group that we co-created with Metro. So our staff helps facilitate and their meetings and helps keep their group going. So that is absolutely one of the concepts. And, I think we're talking about experts and expert knowledge. And I think one of the things that we're learning through our equity work is really that what we have devalued in the past as professional staff in particular is the expert opinion of a community member and their experience interacting with our systems. So, being a garbage company representative is definitely an expert in the garbage industry and how that works. But I also think that we haven't really acknowledged that being a customer or a frustrated resident of a multifamily community or someone that can't get access to translation services through their service providers is an expert in their experience as well. So that's really what we're attempting to center in this committee. And I think what's the purpose of the committee you're asking, and our vision, at least through these revisions, is to center the community's experience in the system. And when we're talking about making changes to multifamily recycling programs and whether or not there needs to be color-coded bins, that's where we really, I think, we need to value the public member's experience and in particular, there's a multifamily member's experience, someone that has had difficulty accessing their recycling programs because they live in a community that does not have adequate service and access. So we're trying to highlight that part of the story because we think that's been missing in our engagement opportunities in the past.
Well, and I may have missed it in my read of your proposed bylaws, but I think it might. And you can either point this out to me and I'll go back and read more carefully, or I just want to ask if it's not already there. Is it possible for the updated code language to include some phraseology to tell the story that the garbage and recycling system is dynamic and it continues to evolve? And in order for us to ensure that our community has good customer service, this committee helps us ensure that there is a good customer supportive ecosystem or system. And then, that's part of the intro of the committee. Then the last question I have, and we can double check with other commissioner questions too, is over, especially the last 3 or 4 years, with climate change being more and more present in everyday conversations. And we've heard it in some of our testimony and community forums. I think about how garbage and trash has an element of forever, right? There is no away. And currently, many materials that we send into the system are not easily broken down. So I think a little bit about the folks who I've come into contact with or have spoken to me in different forums about this arena and their concerns. And I'm wondering if there's any way for us to maybe ask in the application process to see if their perspective might bring in youth in school, or I've certainly learned through AARP that people who are retired experiencing a different lifestyle than people who are working 9-to-5 jobs. So it's like, well, does that tell us that we might need to work harder to have a retired representation? Trying to make sure there's multifamily as well as single family representation, things like that. Is that something that gets handled through more of the input application, or a message in the committee language that says we're striving to ensure the committee includes blah 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 types of experience?
This is a great question. Absolutely. Thank you. And so the way we structured this proposal, and I'll remind you that you're seeing the first half of it really, right? I mentioned that the code is going to authorize the bylaws. And when we get into the bylaws, and we can share that document with you, we'll share it with the advisory committee, and we'll come back to your board to talk about that. Is really where we break down those kind of interests. And the ones we've identified, and you're right on, the aging community has a different experience with their solid waste system, disability community, the youth and student community. So these are interest groups that we have identified as groups we want represented on the committee in terms of the intentional membership categories. And I think we learned also, we heard through community listening, was it's going to be really hard for staff to get these folks onto the committee, to share with them the value of the committee, to share with the community the understanding of why it's important to serve on a garbage and recycling advisory committee, because it is kind of obscure. So I think it's going to be a challenge for us to achieve our vision of this committee in terms of it being well represented and representing all these different interest groups. And we're going to work really hard. We're going to some advice we received from civic leaders was going to other boards and commissions and going to the City of Beaverton's Equity Council and talking to them. Who do you know in the community that is interested in sustainability and waste and materials, and who do you recommend that we could approach as being somebody we could almost recruit for service on this committee? So taking a more intentional and a more proactive approach to asking community members to serve on these committees, I think is going to be one way we achieve that. We also heard from Metro that, and we've talked about this internally here, talking about what does it take to serve as a volunteer, and how do we compensate our community members for their time? And I know we're working on that as a county. We're not there yet, but maybe that's a conversation we need to keep having with our new equity officer and our equity inclusion office. Is how do we create this opportunity so that we're actually valuing folks' time and their lived experience, so that we can compensate them for their meetings and the time it takes to prepare and to learn and to read the materials and to think about the topics, because we're asking them for a lot, and we're asking them to share their experience with us because we don't have that experience represented in our organization, in our committee. So I think that's going to be a great challenge. And another thing we heard and we really understand, again, that it's on staff, is on us, is that it's going to be really important for us to educate the folks that we invite into this committee. So we're going to have to spend a lot of time with our community members. We're going to have to meet regularly. I think it's going to require at least 10 meetings a year to build a relationship and a rapport with a committee, to educate them, to provide them opportunities to talk offline, to talk with staff, to talk and just really dive deep into the topics and situations. So I think you'll see some of that in the bylaws, draft bylaws, and I can share that with you ahead of the proposed conversation if you're interested, and go from there in a sense. But you're spot on, Chair Harrington. I think those are the pieces that really will get to the intent of this proposal, and that's the details in those bylaws that we hope that would get us there.
Okay, so thank you for making sure I understood that there is the code and then there are the bylaws. I'd forgotten about the bylaws part. I've asked quite a few questions here. Let me turn it back over to my colleagues and see what other questions they may have had based on our conversations here, and then we'll start talking about the next steps again. Commissioner Treese?
I don't have any questions. I appreciate the fact that Commissioner Rogers brought up the purpose question and the roles of these people. I strongly support the look at what we ask for from and I'm looking at you, Tom. I support when we are asking our constituents, our residents to participate, how are we taking care of their needs in the meantime as well? So I just want you to know I support that. And I'm waiting to see what the next steps are too. What decisions do you need from us? So I'm fine right now. Thank you. And thank you to Catherine and to Roy for asking the questions that you asked.
So could we go back to your slide that talked about the next steps, Tom? Because I think I need a little help making sure I leave here with the right thinking.
Do we have our faithful PowerPoint driver? There it is. So the next steps really are incorporating the feedback from this conversation into the code. And if you're not comfortable taking on the code language and doing an ordinance, we could come forward with the bylaws in another work session and then kind of take the code and bylaws in parallel in the process. So you can see those details you were looking for, Chair Harrington, and I think that might be helpful for you. So that's an option.
It would for me.
Okay.
I don't know about for the other two. Commissioner Rogers and Commissioner Treese, would you prefer to deal with them serially or as a unit in parallel?
My comments are this, Tom. I'm not sure I'm in agreement at all on the compensation issue. That's a whole policy issue. And I mean, what are we adding? How many committees and how much additional staff? So I'll put that one aside because I'm not there. But I keep going back and reading what they're to do, and they're pertaining to certificates. They're doing advise on increase and decrease in collection rates, reports and recommendations. I don't think we get reports, but everything you said as far as environmental, consumer, all of that makes sense. I mean, there's no issue there. It's just that there's such a huge disconnect between what it says they're doing and the verbiage and what your vision is. So to me, it's very hard to sit there and say we should schedule readings and have public hearings on something that you're not even fitting people to what your vision is. So I think it needs some work, and then you figure out what you want, and then because I have no opposition to what you're saying. I mean, it doesn't, the two documents, what your vision is and this document are not aligned at all. And then I still have the underlying, in my myopic mind, would love to have people who might advise so we don't have to do every bit of the technical work. And so I'm not big on taking all your experts and industry people out because they'll share. If we need to make it, maybe have 15 members. I don't care about that, but I mean, you got to have some role. So anyway, that's my comments.
Madam Chair, members of the board. Yes, there are some really good issues that are raised here today, and I've been emailing Brad a bit on this issue, who's worked on this, and we can work with the staff and try to get to the bottom of some of them and get a more coherent understanding of what we're looking to do here.
Well, I would assume that the member of your staff that's working close on this is listening to the work session discussion. Yeah, that's good. Commissioner Trees, what are your thoughts?
Well, I've just got a question. It sounds like we're talking about the roles of and Roy, I really appreciate, Commissioner Rogers, I really appreciate your clarity in looking at this and saying this isn't matching up. But it sounds like what we're talking about is a committee that looks at rates and community needs and is representative of a variety of different populations and what their experiences are in garbage and recycling. So having that scope piece again, I think is important. The question that you raise, is it appropriate to, do we need the people that are really involved in the rate piece as well as the people that are on the other side of the service delivery piece? And that's, I think, the part that we're struggling with a bit.
So this is Marnie, and I don't know how to break in, but Tom's done a fabulous job, and I think Alan also. I think he's right. We need to go back and provide more clarity and connection between the vision and what's in the document, because I think we didn't necessarily look at that section about the purpose of the committee. But I think one of our policy questions that we'll bring back to you is how much influence because our role, the program, and your role is to regulate the industry. I'm putting it really simply. And how much influence do we want the regulated to have on your board? And so I think that is the real crux. And what I would say is that we're focusing a lot on their role in the rates. Well, the rate methodology is a very clear methodology. It's based on math. It's done by staff. The board has already set the policy on the return on investment. And so their role in setting rates is really pretty de minimis. And so maybe we need to make sure that update is more apparent in both the code and the bylaws. But there's a lot of other important advisory roles that this committee could play. And we're not completely excluding industry. We're just trying to reduce their influence on your role as regulators, I think is how I would sort of boil it down simply.
Thanks for that clarity, Marnie. I think you're absolutely right. I appreciate it.
I would add onto that what Marnie you're saying, and it's important to know that we had this conversation with the advisory committee last Thursday. Is staff values industry's information and their knowledge and their experience, and we work with industry very closely. When we're proposing administrative rules, we share the early drafts with the Washington County Haulers Association. They form subcommittees, and we work with subcommittees to work through language to make sure that it's technically feasible and technically possible. So we spend enormous amounts of time working with industry as partners, because it is a public-private system and we're working together to achieve a common goal. I mean, really, when it gets to the step of the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, is now what this conversation we're having is, what role does this committee play? And I think Roy, Commissioner Rogers, sorry, I keep doing that, pointed out a very good point here, is that the duties section does not necessarily align with this conversation and the vision that we're proposing here as a modified committee.
Great. So what I hear is a lot of good discussion, a lot of good board input, and we're asking you to go back, rework this, and bring us ordinance language and bylaws that will be clearer for all of us.
And we'll bring it back. We'll bring it back together with the bylaws, I think, is what I'm hearing too.
Yeah.
Yep. Sounds great.
And is there any particular deadline by which any such code or bylaws need to be adopted? No particular statutory obligation that is driving us towards some particular month? Whew! No. Isn't that nice for a change? Yeah. But we will get this done. No worries.
Yep.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I
Well,
appreciate all your feedback. It's very
Thank
helpful.
you. Thank you for the presentation.
Yeah, I appreciated the discussion, but I also really appreciated the extent by which you solicited input from all kinds of aspects of our community, stakeholders and different groups, externally as well as internally, as well as with jurisdictional partners. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So it's now 3:36. We have one more item on our agenda with a planned break. So is everybody A-okay with taking a 15-minute break here?
Yes, please.
Okay, terrific. So we'll do that and convene in 15 more minutes. Thank you.
Commissioner or Chair Harrington, you're muted.
You probably couldn't hear me. I walked out of the house without a mask as I went for a short walk around the neighborhood. Ay, not good. I also reminded myself of, thank you, Commissioner Treese. Yeah, I also reminded myself why I would never check email and text messages during the breaks when we met in PSB. Yeah, so have quite a text conversation going on amongst the tri-chairs right now. So, yeah. Anyway, we're back to work session. So we're going to pick back up with the Clean Water Services rates and charges update. So turn it over to Diane, Kathy Leader, and Mark Jockers. Take it away.
Well, thank you, Chair and members of the Commission. This is Mark Jockers, the Government Public Affairs Director with Clean Water Services, and I'm largely here to present a little bit of context and to introduce our CFO, Kathy Leader. As you recall, this is part of a three-step process that we're walking the board through in anticipation of our December 1st hearing on our rates and charges that were delayed from implementation on July 1st. 2 weeks ago, Kathy talked to you about our historic versus actual versus budgeted revenue and income. Last week, we heard from John Tapania with Echo Northwest about economic indicators in the region. And today, we're going to provide you a couple of different options on how to move forward with the rates and charges hearing that you will have on December 1st. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to the smart numbers person, which would be Kathy, who can walk us through this.
Thank you, Mark. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, Chair Harrington and members of the board. Happy to be here. As you may remember, the district deferred planned rate increases during the budget process in June in response to the economic impacts to customers in the district service area due to the pandemic. These rate increases are necessary to invest in resiliency. Resiliency in the workforce with succession planning and related new positions, along with general labor cost increases, and also resiliency to meet future capital infrastructure needs and replacement and renewal, along with new capacity needs and related debt service. Next slide. On the infrastructure side, as we talked before, we're looking at replacement renewal. We have some aging systems within our infrastructure that need care over time. And also we're in protecting and restoring watershed. We're optimizing service. We're doing those capacity enhancements, that's system expansion, and we're focusing on resource recovery in those infrastructure investments. Next slide. So this graph shows you the historical and forecasted sewer and storm revenues and the related percentage change in rates over time. We grayed out 2008 and 2009 to identify the great last recession. So something you saw in Echo Northwest presentation also, show where our revenues looked during that time period. The district, as you can see, the gray line is showing you that percentage change in rates. So in about 2010 through 2013 fiscal year, the district started raising rates just over 5% in order to meet some new capital program needs along with the related debt service. So we saw some increases during that time period. Through forecasting and future analysis, we were able to level out some of those rates starting in 2014. So the 2014 through 2020, our combined sewer and storm rate increase was around 4% over that time period. It's pretty consistent, just under 4. In 2021, the year we're in right now, you see that really odd diversion of that line, the orange line there, showing that in 2021 in our budget, we had a planned 4% increase on swim and a 50-cent increase on storm, but we didn't opt to do those. And so there was a 0% increase on that line post-pandemic. And we mapped out on the gray line what it would have looked like with our combined 5.4% increase in Sandy and storm that's made up of that 5.5% increase in Sandy and 5.4% increase in swim. And it just maps out for you what those revenues look like in our forecast going forward with the change in 2021. Next slide. I provided this just to give you an idea on system development charges, what they look like. Similar to the service fees, the combined Sandy and storm for during the recession 2008, 2009, you see that grayed out area, just kind of shows you where our revenues were during that time period. The main things I wanted to depict or show from this were that one, our system development charges are very volatile. They change year to year based on industrial capacity need buys and working with different cities on capital projects. And then also I wanted to show that green line, that's that percentage change in our rate over time. That's showing you that, our increase in our SDCs is relatively consistent over time. And it really only relates to that inflationary impact of construction costs to the district.
Can I ask for a clarifying question on this slide?
Yes.
So this isn't the level of system development charges, rather this is the revenue, the incoming revenue of system development charges.
Yes, that's correct. This is revenue generation.
Okay. Can we go back to the prior slide just for a sec? Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Next slide. So this is that graph we've shown in the past. It does a good depiction of what the impact is of deferring those rates in fiscal year 2021. And we mapped out and show that if we had been pre-pandemic, the planned rate increases on average per year were going to be around 4.8% in our forecast to meet our operating and capital needs. With the deferral of rates in 2021, we then had to look at a revision to those rate increases, and we put together a revised plan that has an average of about 5.5% increase Sandy and storm over that same time period. Next slide. So bringing to you here today a couple different scenarios and looking at how we go forward with any planned rate increases. We put together a couple different options. Option number one would implement 2 rate increases in 2021, so calendar year 2021. So we would have in January, when we come before the board, we would look at our planned rate increase that was pre-pandemic of the 4.22% combined Sandy and Storm in January, with then the following planned in our pre-pandemic forecast 5.02% increase in July 2021. So in effect, you're seeing an increase in January and 6 months later, an increase July 1 to the rate payer. Option 2 foregoes the increase in 2021, but looks at different options to recoup some of those base revenues in out years. So one looks at trying to recoup the main part in the first year, fiscal year 2022, with the 8.39% increase. And the other one is a phase-in option over a 3-year period, 22 through 24 at 6.3%. And those are both combined rates. Next slide. So here we're graphing out and showing option 1. So this shows that in 2021, on January 1st, we do our 4.22% rate increase, and we see then only a $3 million reduction in our revenues. Our original forecast showed that our rate increase at the beginning of the year, July 1st, would have given us $6 million in revenue collection. And if we do it mid-year, it's roughly a half, $3 million reduction in that revenue. And then in 2022, we see our next then planned rate increase at 5.2% combined. So you see that big spike, and then you see a leveling out, because at that point in 2021, by doing our rate increase, we have that rate increase in our base, and that base is going forward in all your outer years. So you're not losing money on that first year of not raising rates. It's both the pre-pandemic and post-pandemic rate relief in future periods is the same. And that's why you see that estimate that our average rate increase over time would be 4.8% for this option. But it then requires a rate increase 2 times during the calendar year. Next slide. So option 2, we have the 2 different scenarios. This is the first scenario where we do not raise rates in 21. So you have a $6 million reduction in revenue in 2021. But in 2022, we try to make up for that loss in base in that year by doing an 8.39% combined increase. And so it shows then once again that after you increase that base, you pick up that base into in future years. And then once again, the average going forward is around a 4 to 4.5 to 4.8% average increase in the rate over time. And so both pre and post pandemic rate by year are the same. Next slide. So this is the second scenario on a no raising of rates in fiscal year 21. So once again, 2021, there's that $6 million shortfall in revenue from planned. But then we phase in our increase over a 3-year period. So in 2022, we'd have a combined 6.3% increase. In 2023, we'd have a 6.27 combined increase. In 2024, we would have a 6.24% increase, which then, as we roll into 2025 and going forward, those increases are in the base, and the increase over time is in line with what our original pre-pandemic forecast was at roughly 4.8%. Next slide. So let me know if you have any questions on those past slides. There's a lot of data there, but this basically reiterates those different options and the reason that we're here with the board today to kind of talk about what their policy drivers and what direction we have going forward as we go to our rate work session on January 1st.
And actually, Kathy, that rate hearing's on December 1st.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, December.
Implementation effective January 1st.
Yes, you're correct.
So if I'm correct, what you're looking for now is feedback from or direction from the board, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so Commissioner Rogers and Commissioner Treese, any thoughts?
Want me to go first? Okay. Kathy, I've always been curious, and in fact, I shared this with Diane not long ago, whether if we separated our two lines of business, what those increases would look like. We tend to blend all of our revenues into a single operating model. And what I mean, two types of business. For the cities, we're obviously providing certain large conveyance pipes, and then we're doing the plants. And to me, that's a base level of service. Much like in our county strategic plan, we have a base level and say everybody gets the same. If you want more, and we do that with the urban road maintenance, and we do that also with the enhanced sheriff's patrol district. But what would it look like if you had, and I know this is a big ask on my part, but what would it look like if you said, okay, all customers do the plants and they all do certain conveyance, and then you separated it out and you said, here's our retail business, which is quite different. What would those increases look like? Because I'm not for going indefinitely. I understand the pandemic and would like to defer, but I think we got a blended rate, which having gone through many years of wars with our city partners of saying we're subsidizing, aren't we doing the same on the clean water services side?
So we do calculate and adopt separate rates for the two different utilities. We do one rate for our sanitary sewer service that's a base and use component, and we do a separate rate for our storm, which is a flat rate per ESU or equivalent service unit. So that we do separate rates. I do have percentage changes for each of those lines of business each year.
But as I recall,
Kathy, what I think Roy's asking for is there's the base rate where our city partners all pay, and then there are the urban unincorporated areas where we are the retail sanitary collector.
Mm-hmm.
That's
that's it.
Let me help here. So Roy, and Catherine, we have two components of the rate, both for Sandy and Storm. We have a regional rate. So that's the regional rate that all customers pay that's related to the large diameter sewers and the treatment plant. Then the cities the large cities establish their own local rate for their sanitary sewer collection system. So for the small cities and for unincorporated Washington County Clean Water Services, sort of like the city of Clean Water Services, we establish a local rate for their conveyance systems. So we have both the regional and the local rate. I think what Roy is talking about is when we take a look at the local rate, we want to make sure that the local rate for the small cities and for the unincorporated Washington County customers are encompassing all of their costs together to make sure there is no cross subsidies between the regional rate with the local rate. I think that's the crux of the issue.
Yeah,
so in order to do that, so the reason I'm bringing a financial strategist on is so we can actually do that cost of services analysis to verify that there's no crossover between the two. So I think that's the crux, isn't it, Roy, of your issue?
Yeah, and in accounting, we say is it fully loaded, meaning all the costs. And I don't know how you calculate those two rates. I've never really understood that. But do you feel it in the, you call it regional model, I would call it just the base level model, that you capture all of your costs, or how is that divided up between the two buckets, as I call them? The retail bucket and the other bucket, which would be our regional rate.
And so So I can answer that. So before I got to Clean Water Services, there was a cost of services analysis that was done as part of the service delivery work, where it looked at the costs for the what I would call the unincorporated and small cities conveyance systems as compared to the large cities conveyance systems and the rates between the two. So they did utilize and take a look at a cost allocation method. So at that time, when the IGAs were negotiated, there was $2 million from the regional rate that was provided to the large cities together in order to pay for their sanitary sewer system improvements for 12-inch and above 12-inch diameter sewers. So there was a program that was created on the regional sides to help with the balances between the rates that they saw back then. You know, I think we are needing to do another cost of services analysis, and that's the reason for the financial strategists that we're hoping to recruit and bring on. It's to specifically institute cost allocation and COSA work for the utility to make sure that we're maintaining the balances between the small cities, the large city services, as well as the base services or the regional services for treatment and large diameter pipelines and pump stations.
Pick that out a little bit, because there could be subsidy going the other way. As I recall, there was a program, and I thought it was curious at the time, but to allow cities a certain subsidy, as you call it, if they put in 12-inch lines. It didn't take anybody too long to figure out, I don't put anything smaller than 12 because, you know, Clean Water Service will pay for all those 12-inch lines. They don't pay for something smaller. So I would certainly encourage that. I don't know how soon that all is and how it affects these rates, maybe not at all, but I'm wondering which way that so-called subsidy, if one exists, goes. It could go between us in the cities. They actually get a subsidy, and so that would be curious as well.
Yeah, my long-term concern is the cost of that policy, right? To replace the sewer lines in the city for anything that's 12 and larger. I am concerned from an asset management standpoint as the region ages, that liability for Clean Water Services grows. Therefore, that cost grows, and we would need to be able to recover that as part of the regional rate. But there's a lot of COSA, so cost of services, as well as asset management work that would need to go on to be able to forecast what those replacement cycles would look like. And that would need to be a joint effort between Clean Water Services and the large cities to get a true handle on what that liability is and what the shape of that financial liability is over time.
Thank you for the academic conversation. I think it needs to be done at some point, but I guess if we don't have the information and we can't figure it out what our buckets are at this point, we have some educated guesses that I kind of like an option 3, which would be some modest increase in January, a bigger one and I guess maybe that's what you're doing in July. And I don't know what those are rates. I mean, you assume different models and you could do it ad nauseum, but I just think the optics on 4.22 on January is not great, but we can't go beyond July 1 and not put something in, but I don't know. So I'm just talking out loud, no stop.
Commissioner Treese?
Thank you, Chair. I have a question. I had really good conversation with Diane and Mark about this, but our conversation was before the 2-week freeze, potentially 4-week freeze. Did that change any of your thoughts in relationship to the two options? Either one of you?
Yeah, you know, what we talked about is if we wanted to have a consistent rate for the our customers to rely upon, a 5.8% rate increase that would start in July of 2021 would need to go on through 2029. And what would happen is it would take 10 years to essentially get the utility even keeled again. So essentially we would be back on track in 2030, and it would take to 2030 to make up the revenue loss. So we would be at a 5.8% rate increase for the next 10 years. We would be having to really tighten our belts. So, but it's doable. But that would be a situation where we would be essentially losing money through the first 5 years, and then we would be making the money back up. So the loss gets as high as probably $12 to $13 million during that time period before we make that money up. So essentially, in order to live with that situation, we would need to probably defer the capital investments in that time period. The other model is to look at raising the rates for 3 years. So if we don't do the rate increase and we started on July, to raise it at 7.5% for 3 years, and then we could return to the rate model. And what that does is it would allow us to make up the lost revenue by 2024. So we would be very even keeled at that point. The Kathy's model, essentially, if you did a hybrid of her model where you started at 8.39% and then 3 years of 6.3%, essentially, we would be able to also make up that revenue by 2024. So rate making is often an art, right? As well as a science in terms of looking at the revenue recovery. My personal rate making philosophy is it's better to have consistent rates than it is to spike it and reduce it. Certainly Kathy's option 1, it puts us even keeled by July 1. But that's a rate increase in January and a rate increase in July. And I do understand from a rate making perspective and working with our customers that could be viewed as being untenable. So the fallback, my suggestion would be to go to 3 years at 7.5% and then be able to drop it down to the previous roughly 5%, 4.8 to 5%. That would give us more consistency for a 3-year time period. But you certainly, what we talked about is that fallback model, which is you institute a 5.8% for the next 10 years. But it would be pretty tough. We would be getting into our reserves to be able to maintain programs and to manage the capital expense. Part of what Kathy's trying to do is make sure that as we fund our capital programs and when we do need to issue debt service, that we have adequate debt service coverage and the reserves that would be necessary to service that debt. So she's, her goal would be from a financial perspective is to get us even keeled by July 1st, to be fair, right? So that's even, from the business side, that's what you would want to do. But on the second side is really sort of that humanitarian and sort of that rate making magic that we do to be able to meet the policy needs and the political dynamics within the region. So that's sort of, I wanted to give you sort of the bookends of where this rate model could be. So that 5.8% model for 10 years is one bookend. You could do an extreme bookend, which is if you want to get even keeled in 1 year, you would spike the rate up to probably almost 10%. And I don't think that's a palatable bookend, really. So we're trying to find sort of that middle ground is what we're trying to find for the board.
I'd like to.
Sorry, Mark, go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner Treese. I think you asked a good question too. 2 weeks ago, there wasn't this additional 2-week or potentially 4-week freeze. And I take us back to the decision that the board made in June on the budget to delay this because of the impacts of the pandemic on our ratepayers and on the economy here. What we heard from John Tapania last week is that the fundamentals of the economy seem to be pretty good and not as bad as we thought they might have been. So it really gets to that issue that Diane is mentioning, which is kind of what is the policy or the human impact issue of making this decision. We saw that K-shaped recovery, right, where we have lower income ratepayers are taking this. It's a little more difficult for them right now than it is for upper income ratepayers. So, and I'm not sure what this really says to us, other than does it take us back to that same question of how does the pandemic?
Well, when Diane talks about that far out bookend, there's no guarantee over a 10-year course of time that we're not going to be looking at additional problems along the way that aren't dissimilar to what we're facing right now. So obviously I'm not in favor of that approach. So thank you for your explanations. I just wanted to kind of rejigger where what lens we're looking through now, because it is a little different today than it was a week ago or so.
And if we were able to continue with the rate support through, if there's additional CARES money or if other money becomes available in the future, that could be very helpful, even with a rate increase in July in moving forward.
Got it. I think that's my only question right now. Back to you, Chair. Or maybe to Roy.
Well, you're looking for our direction. You've described about 4 different, excuse me, can you go back, please? You described about 4 different options that you considered as you pondered, at least Diane pondered her philosophy, and you gave us 2 directions specifically that you're looking for feedback today. Commissioner Willie did share with me after meeting with all of you before he left on vacation that he does not support option 1, but he didn't say he supports option 2 either. I think it's also important, whether it was for today's presentation, but certainly for any potential future work sessions on policy rates and charges, as well as for any actual business meeting for adoption, that we summarize the context. I don't particularly agree with the summary that Mark gave of the presentation that we saw from Mr. Tapania. The fundamentals tell us that it's bad. It's just no longer real bad. And we as commissioners are hearing this from our community. Irrespective of being in a freeze, we know that the business community and residents continue to be hurting. So the environment, the context that we're in continues to be bad. The best estimate we've been able to get from him and other economists here in our state is that K-shaped recovery, that our economy is not going to recover until 2023. So as much as I don't particularly care for the increasing the rate in January of option 1, I really dislike the idea of peaking up and then falling down. So that's where your second option 2 of having that more consistent increase over 3 years seems more palatable, because you're not spiking up and then coming down with still another rate increase, just slightly less than that peak. But what I really had to remind myself through the conversation is that we're providing a service. And we have obligations in order to provide that service. And so what we're talking about is how we're going to catch back up on those obligations. And I think that too needs to be presented as we move forward with this. Now, back to the earlier discussion for Commissioner Rogers' question, that to me felt like we were replowing the same ground that we've had in at least 2 other meetings since I've been on the board. This discussion about the regional system, how the cities take care of the neighborhood collectors, but for the urban unincorporated areas, as well as those small cities, that Clean Water Services is both that regional provider as well as providing that retail service of the neighborhood collectors. Now, it's fine if I'm describing it incorrectly, but the bottom line is we have to come up with a model and come up with agreement on what the system is and the phraseology, because we keep replowing that same ground trying to understand it. And we know that there is tension amongst the fact that we provide both types of services, and that for our cities, as well as the service district of Tualatin Valley Water District, they're moving forward with their drinking water rate structure, irregardless of what the sanitary and surface water needs are. So we're trying to be very accommodating in terms of their rate needs, but they're moving full steam ahead with their drinking water provision and projects and their rate increase needs. So we're all going to hear it in terms of the end user customer and their bills. The cities will be able to blame something more on us than we'll be able to blame on ourselves for the urban unincorporated and small city customers, right? Because we're the same provider in both cases. So for me, I'm hearing that multiple board members don't want to go with option 1. I have a hard time with the first flavor of option 2. I much prefer that second graph that you drew for the second flavor of option 2. Doesn't really have a label on this page. But bottom line for me, before I'm going to vote on an action to adopt these charges, is I want clarity on that service provision, because I need to be able to defend the rate increases and defend the structure that we have. And right now, I can't do that. Commissioner Rogers and Commissioner Treese, do you have any last thoughts?
No, I don't think so. I don't know that we're in disagreement. Why we keep plowing it is because we don't really have an answer, and there's some unfairness on either side, and I prefer to have I guess my occupational problem, but I prefer to have it very clear so it's undisputable. But I can't get there on option 1 at the January 1, but I'm much more inclined to do something more than 5.02 on July 1, and maybe you're saying 8.39, so and maybe it needs to be a little bit higher, but or maybe a small increase if it was 2.22 when we take the other 2% and kick it into 21. I'm not sure, but so maybe it's 7.02 and it's 2.22 and then 7.02. I agree. We can't kick it down the road. We got to pay for our costs. So I'm just throwing out other alternatives. So
Catherine, Chair, are you saying that your preference here between these 2 is option 1? Is that what I'm hearing? No, option 2. Or the
Kathy,
hybrid.
Can you go back to your previous chart, because
Sorry.
you presented 2 different option 2s.
So this is option 2 with all of the increase recognized in year 2022. So a combined increase of 8.39%, that's Sani and swim, and that reflects a 9% increase on the sanitary side and a 50-cent swim. This option phases that increase in over 3 years. So 6.3% in 2022, 6.27 in 2023, and 6.24 in 2024. And that reflects a 6.5% increase on the Sani side, and once again, the 50-cent increase on the swim side by year. So one thing.
The next slide should have had option 2A and option 2B.
Yeah.
And what I was saying is I don't support a 2A because it has this big spike, and as opposed to softening the overall blow over 3 years, because the economy is still going to be hard in fiscal year 22.
I'll just jump in and say, yeah, I like the smoothing. Anything that was smooth is good. But 4.22 on January 1 might be a little high. Got to do something though. I agree.
One thing, if I could add, when you're thinking about the rate increases in our forecast, because we did see, replacement and renewal and new capacity buy and some of the different costs that are out there for us, we had updated our forecast. We weren't showing 3% every year going forward. Our forecast actually had 4% in this current fiscal year of 21, and then in out years was growing at 5% per year on the Sani side, and then the 50-cent swim increase to meet our capital needs and to start saving money related to the water supply project. So our forecast already had some upticks in rates going forward.
So one thing that I hear you saying is that I think the first policy question we're calling is rate increase in January or not. And if I am so bold to summarize what I'm hearing you say, is that the preference is not to raise rates in January. And then with the 2B option to look at more of a measured recovery of those funds rather than a spike.
That's my preference.
That's what I was saying. Commissioner Rogers, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking that we need to hit the lottery so we could pay for some of this stuff. But if I could have my druthers, we probably would. I'm going to go with the majority, but it's something modest in January. But if people don't feel, the optics are not good, and we push it off till July. I'm with you guys.
So I can't help you with what Commissioner Willie will support. I only know what he was against. And I don't know if he shared his thinking with you in his briefing.
I think it was real similar to not do a rate increase in January, to come up with the rate plan that had modest increases that were predictable going forward. It's similar. It's a very similar view, and I agree with that. So the question would be, we'll do some more rate model work to see what that rate increase would need to be, so it's a modest but yet predictable rate. And we'll get there, and we'll talk about the things that in the future that we'll need to be able to control to be able to live on that rate slope, which is doable. So
what you'll see from us in 2 weeks on December 1st, where the rates and charges are now, is a recommendation not to increase the rates in January. This discussion about what that rate model looks like and what that slope looks like will be one that we will have over the next several months. Certainly we'll have it fully in place by budget, but certainly can come back and talk to you, as well as talk about this issue of on-service provision as well.
Okay. Commissioners, do you need anything else?
So when we put that announcement out, will we also say that, but July is when the can stop, we can't kick the can any further than July? Okay, I just want to make sure that that's a clear communication as well. Thank you.
I agree, and we also need to be unanimous on this. We can't be having it picked apart because we're doing different things. So I'm hoping we'll have 5-0 in whatever we agree to.
And the way we can step into this is we make that definitive statement that we are not going to raise rates in January, that we're going to relook at rates in July as part of the budget process. That would give us more time to do the rate information that Roy and Commissioner Rogers and the chair has asked to provide a little more information as we move into that. Yeah.
Dan, the only thing, again, I'm going to say that I agree that we say we're not going to increase the rates in January, but that puts us, it continues to increase the precarious situation that we're in, or something to that effect. Because I don't want it to look at all arbitrary that we just said, oh, now we're not going to raise it in January. I think we recognize what the situation is. We're willing to take a hit here, but again, we have to raise the rates in July.
I think Commissioner Teresa's point is really important. We can't be using this in techno speak. It needs to be, the message needs to be conveyed from a customer view lens that we are delaying recovering charges for obligations in order to help our customer base navigate through these difficult times. That means that as a board of directors, we are continuing to carry more financial risk on behalf of the customers that we foresee we will need to recover starting in our next fiscal year.
Mm-hmm.
And I do have one, I apologize, I do have one question. What if, the stars align, I'm just being silly, but the stars align in April, let's pick April. Everything looks, the economy is roaring and everything. Why do we have to do on these specific dates? Could we not come back and revisit this and say, gee, we're not going to have a date that's predictable? I know Commissioner Willie may have a problem with that, but if we were to say we're not doing anything on January 1, but we're revisiting in the spring, is that not doable? Or maybe nobody else would support that, but there's so much up in the air right now.
My concern, Roy, on that is that I think it puts into the customer brain more uncertainty again. And from my perspective, I think we're better off to say we're going to delay this until July, but then it's going to start.
All right. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
And we would do it as part of the budget process, right?
Okay.
So you could base it on the budget, but we'll lead with the message that we're not going to raise the rates. So the action I'm thinking that will come to you is that specific action that we're holding rates steady.
Why does the customer care if we do it as part of the budget process?
No, that was just for this board. That wasn't the message to the community. The message to the community is because of the pandemic and our ongoing concerns, we're going to hold rates steady through July. That's really the public piece. But for the board, you'll reconsider it as part of the budget process.
So back to Commissioner Teresa's question, structurally, by having our billing integrated in with the for example, the city billing, and then for TVWD, there isn't any structural deadline by which we have to make changes. We can do it on a quarterly basis if we wanted, ?
Oh, to answer Commissioner Rogers' question about considering it in April?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, so it actually, you would want to then relook at the question in January and February so that the cities would, if we were going to consider something in April, then we would need to bring something forward again about 60 days beforehand.
This is going to sound silly, but think it through for a minute. I would hate the cities to all raise their rates. It's kind of like capping it out. So then we come in with a rate in July and they said, I just paid this bigger rate. So I don't know what all of our partners are doing. And so if they're all raising rates and taking out the oxygen between, what we might be able to do by our delay, we're really penalizing them. So the other thing I thought I had is that it's not, unfortunately, it's not based on consumption. So it's a rate. I mean, you could get the same answer in an increase with just saying that the rate covers a certain consumption. If you're above that consumption, then you pay more. So it's how you couch it. I mean, if you're using a lot more for the same rate, that doesn't make sense because it's a commodity. Is there a way to figure out? And again, I dearly value our partnership with the cities, but if their consumption is a lot more, is there a way to say that our rates are only based upon a certain consumption, so you pay more if you consume more?
Commissioner Rogers, so 35% of our rates are based on consumption. And we take the temperature of that on July 1st based on the previous winter. So there is some level of consumption based into our overall rate. The other issue you raise is rate capacity. And that's certainly something that we think about. A lot of the drinking water people, in fact, most of the drinking water suppliers raise their rates in the winter, typically on January 1st or December 15th or something, because that's when usage is lower. All those people are currently on that schedule. They're on their regular rate increase schedule. I think Tigard and Beaverton and Hillsborough and Tualatin Valley Water District as well.
Isn't consumption based upon water use though, Mark?
Consumption, the consumption portion of the sanitary sewer rate is based on, yes, water usage between November and April of the previous winter. So we reset it every July based on your previous winter.
So if our customers, and that could be cities, that could be, if they've had a large consumption change, our rates are not changing for the consumption change.
No, our rates will the rate change impacts both the consumption and the use side.
But it wouldn't for now because you're not doing anything in January. So I could have consumed a whole lot more, and it'll be next July when you tentatively look at me, but I've consumed a lot more. I went and filled up my gas tank a whole bunch more. I've got a bigger gas tank, but I'm not paying anything for it. That's in essence what's happening.
You'll pay for it next year though, because we're going to look at how much gas you put in that tank the previous winter. I mean,
as long as there's not a lot of compression, so that there isn't any way to get it up because everybody else is arguing about already picked up a lot. So that's the compression issue that you mentioned as well. So this isn't easy. It's a lot of hydraulics. Yeah.
Did you go over that model with me in one-on-one, or was that from one of our recent work sessions with you guys? Because I remember you're describing the clean water services usage rate versus the drinking water rate year-round and their average.
We talked about that 2 weeks ago when we talked about budget versus historical versus average, and the leading versus lagging indicators of, or how far lagged water is versus sewer.
Yeah, so I think what this tells us is when we have another work session, the future one, whether it's in budget or whatever, you're going to need to bring that material back and remind us how the rate structure works, so that with all these different percentages we've thrown around today, we can help land them in terms of what the customer will end up seeing. What I don't recall hearing the answer of yet, maybe I wasn't listening closely enough, was, I thought Commissioner Rogers was asking about the reminder of what's happening with drinking water rate structure, because I think a couple of weeks ago you mentioned, but I don't remember now, that some of our drinking water providers some are on a glide path now where they're already increasing like 6% or so because of the Willamette Water Supply Project, but others have additional, or maybe it's that same one, another spike. And so he was asking about what the near future landscape looks like. Could you remind us of that again?
Sure. Tualatin Valley Water District, City of Beaverton, and the City of Hillsborough are all implementing rate increases in the next 2 months. So some of them are in December, some of them are in January. All three of those in particular are being driven in part by the Willamette Water Supply Project. Those rate increases, I believe they are somewhere between 8.5% and 12%. I mean, actually, Tualatin Valley Water District's much lower than that, but Beaverton and Hillsborough are in that higher range. But that's on their regular schedule. It's not a result of rates they delayed from July 1st. This is on the regular schedule that they would raise them on.
So are we the outliers in the whole drinking water sanitary domain for taking a pause on our rate structures versus just sticking to our normal rate plan?
That's a good question. I think relatively speaking, yes, we are an outlier there. I think what you're seeing on the water side from income is they are pausing on all their shutoffs and collection associated issues. So they have other pieces that they're doing there. I know the City of Tigard brought back a parks fee that they had delayed from July 1st for implementation on January 1st. Their council decided not to implement that parks fee, but they did move forward with a local stormwater fee that had been delayed. It was a small amount.
Well, I think no one else is going to tell our story of delaying a rate increase. We've got to make sure we do that and do it well for ourselves. And then go from there. And I think what you're hearing today is because of the economic conditions, restarting in January doesn't seem comfortable enough for us. So we want to recoup the charges, but rather than having a spike and then a decrease, we're looking for that softer increase pattern, but getting back to making sure we're covering those obligations. Yeah. So thank you for reminding me of that good conversation we had in work session a couple weeks ago that included the drinking water front, more of the, what does the landscape look like? I appreciate it.
Sure.
Fellow commissioners, do you need anything more today?
This is really hard. And I just want to show my appreciation for the discussion with fellow commissioners, with Diane and Mark and Kathy, and trying to help guide us through this. But I'm feeling good that we all have the same perspective, at least the people here on this phone right now. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're right. It is. It's much harder than I would have imagined. Here we are, we're trying to be receptive to our community in these difficult times, and it feels really hard. But
no,
okay.
we really appreciate the board's care and watching over the rate base and all of our residents and businesses that are impacted by the pandemic. So the team very much appreciates that of this board, and we can come up with the rate plan that will meet the objectives that you have and to give you options. So.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Great,
much.
thank you.
Thank you, Clean Water Services, for your hard work. I know you worked hard to make sure that we understand this, that we see the upsides and the downsides of everything. And Kathy, you do a great job of explaining this. Sometimes my eyes cross, but I do appreciate the way that you bring it forward.
Well, I definitely know that they explored other options as they described to us and lost me in the vast array of percentage numbers that they were illustrating. It's like, oh no, overload. I better turn my video off. So I did.
Kathy, you're just too smart for me. That's the problem.
Kathy knows where all the pennies go, right? Where all the money is, and we
Which is
really
what we
appreciate
need.
that.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
All righty. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our work session with 5 minutes to spare. Does anybody need anything or need to check in on anything? Let me see. I don't have a tri-chair update with regard to the multiple meetings with the governor on Thursday, so stay tuned. I might know something at 6:30 that I don't know now.
We did get an announcement today. I didn't
From
come to,
Leah.
yeah, about the money going into the business community. You saw that? Okay.
Yep.
And I forwarded that to Alex and to, I don't know if Jerry's looking at his emails right now, but I did forward that off to see what that means to our group in terms of how we're allocating funds. So.
Yep.
So we're on at 6:30.
Yes, indeedy.
Yahoo!
Okay, have a good dinner, folks. See you later.
Then.